Hello everybody and welcome to more Bandit Survivor, but just with a little bit less effort. And today we are here finally ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. We are going to be discussing the power rankings for week 5, episode 9 plus 10. It has been a very busy week on my end, and it's just everything keeps getting added to my schedule, so I can't even decide, okay, this is the day I'm going to sit down and do recording, because things keep popping up and I'm just asked to constantly do lots of stuff. But we finally are here able to talk about the power rankings, even if it is a little bit late. So let's get into them. At number 11, the person that I had at the bottom of my previous power rankings was Lee. And Lee is someone that is a bit of a mixed bag. And I do have to say, for Lee, I did watch his exit press, so I do have some sorts of things to talk about that he brought up, and it kind of has changed my opinion a little bit of Lee. I mean, obviously he's one of the most physical people on the cast, and I feel like that was very advantageous for him, being able to make the merge, especially with the challenges pretty much mostly being dedicated to physicality. And obviously with him being an athlete, he was greatly helped, and obviously didn't receive a single vote pre-merge. And I do also think that obviously people have their criticisms of Lee, and obviously I do as well, but I feel like he is a little bit underrated strategically. I mean, he tries to lie to get Ashley out, he understands he needs to throw Christopher under the bus, he does catch out Ren, and we even see in situations with Express, like with Rach, that people were suspicious of her having an idol, so they do decide to split the vote on her and Ashley, so I think that that's good. Lee also talks about in his Express about how he actually threw the merge challenge to be able to diminish his threat level, which obviously wasn't the right idea in hindsight considering he was the target, but I do like that aspect, that he is considering his threat level and trying to manage it. It doesn't work out in this situation, but I think that that is something that could be worked on. And I do know that Lee has talked about watching Survivor beforehand. Now, I do empathise with Lee as well as all the other contestants in Survivor UK, where something that I can somewhat justify on Survivor UK is the lack of people with Survivor knowledge, because again, Survivor is so hard to get access to here in the UK. It's so hard to get consistently reliable episodes to seasons. Sometimes you might only be able to see the rough episode of a certain season, and Lee has talked about how he would go online and he would search for Survivor and he would end up watching like the Australian Outback episode 5, and then he would watch something like Palau episode 2 or whatever, and I feel like that caused him to have a bit of a disjointed appearance and idea about Survivor, where he wasn't getting the full picture. He was also someone that was taking a lot of, I guess, not necessarily the wrong aspects from Survivor, but the less important ones, where he very much seemed to harp on about mateship, and he was someone that wasn't willing to write down people's names because he said that he wasn't, and that he was super focused on whoever didn't perform at the challenge that day was getting voted, which I think is already a flawed mentality within a flawed mentality, where obviously even in Borneo, people were, the first season of Survivor US, the first season of Survivor ever, people were thinking more than just challenge strength, even pre-merge. And for Lee to go off challenge strength, but not just challenge strength overall, specifically in one challenge, something that could be so different depending on the playing field. Like, you could have a balance challenge or a strength challenge or a stamina challenge. It is a bit of a worrying prospect that that is the ideology he had. He also did have pretty bad social gameplay, especially with the women that we saw in the edit, where it seemed like really none of them outside of Hannah wanted to align with him. He comes off as far too selfish, someone that was voting for Leani when the rest of the tribe was trying to get rid of Ren. He makes very immature comments about Ashley being an airhead Barbie, about Chris being curly and being a lapdog for her, which again, like, if you're looking to try and survive that round and make it to the final tribal council, which Lee obviously was trying to do, how are you ever going to try and secure those jury votes after making such emotional remarks like that? And again, I think he probably would have been a good if he made it to the end. I don't see a single person that Lee could have sat beside that he would be able to claim that he played a better game with. I mean, I think the jury was just very disappointed with some of the actions of Lee. We even see Leani telling him to stop having a go at Ashley and Christopher and to think about what words he's using, but that's my spiel about Lee. Now, I do know that he has been studying about the game, and I know that there are certain aspects of the game that Lee has now learnt more about, and I'm sure if we do see Lee again, that he'll be a far more improved Survivor player. Be interesting to see him on Heroes vs Villains if he does return, but that's my long-winded remarks about Lee. And now at number 10, hopefully it's not as long, we have Ashley. And for me, Ashley was someone that I never had too high on my list, where it was kind of odd. I feel like I had Ashley higher on my list than other people in the earlier weeks, but the previous week I had her a bit lower than other people that seemed to genuinely regard her as a top winner contender, where I've never really saw it, where I felt like her relationships with individuals were so underexposed, where Rach was introduced to us last minute, her relationship with Ren could have been a lot stronger, and it was only really tied to Christopher that we even saw any of her social skills, which obviously results in her getting eliminated. But obviously she does have a lot of positives. I mean, she does seem like a solid social figure, gets along with a lot of people. She was willing to throw Chris and his idol under the bus when Matthew asks her. So again, good game awareness, understanding that she's on the bottom, needs to make some moves to be able to have that shield and Christopher go before her. She also does get kind of screwed with Chris playing the idol. I mean, they even said that they were going to split the votes and then do Chris on the revote, and it was very unfortunate that that just happened where Christopher was able to play the idol. And I think out of everyone that we've discussed so far, Ashley is the first person I could legitimately see back for All Stars. Again, I don't know how involved Ashley is. I mean, she's been Instagramming and talking a lot about Survivor UK, but I don't know what her returnee prospects are like. But if we're going anything like Australian Survivor, which had their All-Star season in Series 5, we could potentially be seeing in about 3.5-4 years the return of Ashley, and I think she would be quite high on my winner contention rankings, to be honest, because she did display some very good gameplay skills for this season, considering that she was on the bottom and up against it. I think that she has shown a lot of very good positives. The only negative is that, I mean, as we kind of see in this merge round this whole week, really, she does lack threat management, and I feel like she just comes off a bit too obviously as a person in charge, as someone that is using these social relations to be able to try and manipulate people. So that is a bit of a worry, but again, with that being the only negative, it can be ironed out. So Ashley's here at number 10. Now we have the top 9, the top 50% of the cast of Survivor UK, and at number 9, someone that has been pretty much at the bottom of my power rankings for most of these weeks, and finally, with Lee going, he has slid to the bottom, and that is Lawrence. And for me, Lawrence is someone that just has a very circumstantial edit. I mean, he seems to be really at this stage only represented when he's needed, like to explain about the fish dilemma, explain about the positioning of himself and another individual, like we saw last week with Shy, or comic relief, where obviously he was a big part of the auction. He was making some remarks during episode 10, but again, I don't really know much about Lawrence's background at this point, and that has resulted in him being at the bottom. He also has no defined relationships set up, where the only one that seemed to potentially have some roots was his relationship with Lee, where they were talking around the well about how the guys need to stay together, only for obviously Lee to be the merge boot. But there are some positives about Lawrence. I mean, I think he took his blindside well from the Calaton 2.0 tribe. We see that he's talking to Doug about how they slept, and he's being quite an admirable individual, being able to, again, forget about the blind side and play the game, which is good. It's good that he didn't have this emotional outburst, otherwise he probably could have been the merge boot. And then he has seemed to integrate himself into this new majority. He actually was a swing at the Lee tribal to a certain extent, even though, again, I don't think he would have been ever able to get himself and other people to side with Lee. It is good that he had both sides coming up to him. But again, just so many negatives, and in my opinion, the person that is least integral to the edits and the overall narrative of the season, so I have Lawrence here. Not number 8, someone again, very under-edited, someone that again isn't super necessary to the storyline or the edit, but they have been getting small boosts in their screen time, and that is Hannah. And to be fair, as I already said, we are starting to get a little bit more insight from Hannah, her perspectives on the game. Like, she gets to talk about the Lee Tribal Council, about why she's flipping the vote, about what Lee means to her, so that's good. And I also think now that we're in a situation where in the final 9, with only 3 women left, we obviously see that that's a defining storyline, particularly from Tanuk and by association Leani, where they are wanting to keep in the women, so she should have some survivability through that as well. But the problem is, and you kind of notice this trope with Australian Survivor mostly, is that contestants that get a boost in their screen time after an underwhelming streak is often a bad sign. I mean, we even see this in Survivor 45, where the likes of Sifu and Jay Maya were getting a bit more content leading up to their boot episodes and a bit more exposure in the screen time before they obviously got blindsided. So that is a bit of a worry. She was left out of the League Tribal Council, and even Pegleg, tensions better known by flipping the vote. Nathan says he has concerns about her, and again, she's not super well set up in the edit. And I really don't know who Hannah has left to work with, where even her relationship with Lee wasn't super well defined. It was kind of set up that Hannah was willing to turn on Lee, only for that to obviously not come into fruition. So yes, it is pretty worrying seeing everything all in all, so I have left her here at number 8. Now number 7, someone that, again, is pretty much middle of the road, someone that hasn't changed in the rankings, and that is Nathan. And again, hasn't changed in the rankings, but because there are less people, he's technically slid down. And again, I think there is positivity to his edit. I mean, the edit backs him up for being the quote-unquote good guy, for wanting Shy out, talking about how they don't have to walk on eggshells. That was a quote from Doug, actually, so that's good that it's coming from a second-person perspective. He gets to outline his concerns working with Doug and Hannah, so that's good game awareness. And then also, it seems like he, Matthew, Tanuk, and Leani seem to be at the core of the power structure, so that's all good to see. The thing is, and this is kind of interesting about Survivor UK, is that the merge challenges seem really not physical, considering how physical the season was prior. I mean, the 2 challenges that we've had really do not favour the archetype of Nathan, and we even see that he hasn't performed very well, where he's one of the first people to get eliminated in the pot challenge, and then the last gasp, he was the first person out. These are challenges that really physicality don't help you, and even for the pot challenge, I've said before, having muscular legs is actually a hindrance, and we see a lot of people with more muscular legs struggle. And the negatives for Nathan is that he seems to be set up as almost this right-hand man figure to Tanuk. Again, Tanuk, this has been a recurring theme throughout the season, seems to be getting a lot more content that is impactful over Nathan. And this just might be me, but I feel like he also had a pretty underwhelming merge episode. Just kind of generic content talking about what the merge means, about how it's an individual game. Like, it's okay content, but I feel like, again, kind of my issue with Nathan throughout the season is that, again, it's just very generic content. It's nothing about Nathan personally. It even goes back to the Carlton 1.0 tribe, where he was talking about the morale and the charisma of the tribe and how they were super excited for the challenge. But it's like, okay, but who's Nathan? So he's here at number 7. Number 6, a small drop-off, but nothing too significant, and that is Leilani. And I am still feeling like Leilani is going to be a losing finalist by the end of the season. Again, I don't really see how this story translates to a winner per se, but I think she has got longevity, and I feel like that has been teased with her relationships. I mean, we see that she has a good relationship with Tanuk. She is displayed positively when calling Ashley out on the beach, and we even see her plan succeeds in eliminating Lee in the challenge. Her, Tanuki, and Christopher threw it to Doug, so that kind of builds up resolution for her in the edit. She's even shown to be a good individual in the arguments with Lee about the Pillowgate at Tribal Council, where she says Lee to watch his mouth and watch what he's saying. And we have particular emphasis to her relishing that Shy, who received a lot of negativity, was voted out. Again, kind of showing her in a positive light, as we've already discussed. There are some negatives, however. I mean, she loses a lot of potential content to Sanuke, as we were talking about, similar to Nathan. She's starting to be showcased as like an emotional player during the merge, someone that really is kind of judging people on the negativities that they show and is kind of berating them for that. And again, kind of similar to a losing finalist, her story feels very much like a journey arc, kind of like her finding resolution throughout the season for her personally in her life, which is good, but generally it doesn't really lead to winners, where winners again have a lot more focus on like their strategic content and what the game means for them rather than how the game is forming their life, which is more so reserved for final jurors. I mean, she could be a final juror as well, and then also finalists. So again, not too high on her, but she has got more positivity and more consistency than the other people, so at least there's that. But next on this list at number 5, someone that again has slidden down a little bit, and that is Pegleg. And for me, Pegleg is someone that obviously I was higher on last week, and I feel like this merge was a little bit of a disappointment for Pegleg, where we do start to see some of the negativities rise from his edit, but also some positives. I mean, we do get positive resolution scene with him and Doug, talking about how they managed to flip the game in 5 days. Again, more so from Doug's perspective, but I feel like by association, it's still pretty good for Pegleg. Despite losing Lee, he still has relationships established, like the likes of Hannah and Doug, so again, some longevity established in the edit through those pre-established connections. He is willing to throw his name out there for the greater good of his majority alliance, and I think that that's a positive, because when you really look at it, that scene wasn't very necessary, where we could have just skipped out that the majority don't know who to tell Christopher and Ashley the full vote is for, and just continue with that storyline. So I think it does kind of show Pegleg's game awareness and him trying to, again, show his loyalty to the majority alliance. And again, considering that seems like a pretty unnecessary scene, I think it is a positive for Pegleg in a weird way. He calls correctly that Christopher has an idol as well, and he also gets positive content talking about how he won the last gasp challenge, talking about how he was able to basically predict the waves and be able to time his breathing to that. And then that also ties into his backstory of obviously being a swimming coach and a surfing coach. Now, there is some negatives, and even though these negatives are small, again, I've only got 2 bullet points, they are pretty damning. Again, he says he can't lose Lee, only to lose Lee, which is very worrying. Again, Lee and Pegleg were one of the more established duos in the edit. Pegleg was someone that I even identified in the first 2 weeks that was coming off as a bit of a lackey to Lee, so losing Lee is a big knock for Pegleg. And again, he also loses a lot of his potential content to Doug, both in the Calaton 2.0 tribe as we were starting off this week, and even in the merge. So again, he's here at number 5. Not number 4, definitely by far the biggest jump that we're going to be seeing on this list for the rest of Survivor UK Series 1, that is Matthew. Now, Matthew is someone that I've always been skeptical about, and again, he is at number 4, he hasn't broken into the top echelon, where I've always been reserved and skeptical about Matthew and his edit, and there are still definitely holes, but considering the fact that I've talked about how the merge is so important for deciding winners, Matthew does tick a lot of those boxes. I mean, he gets to talk about how league going would be good for him winning immunity challenges down the line, so again, longevity in his edit, strategy, which is the thing that I knocked him that he didn't include in his confessionals previously. It was just kind of this happy-go-lucky guy. Now we're actually seeing him play the game and having some foresight, which is good. He identifies that the game is now every man for himself. He acknowledges the majority is on Chris, that he doesn't trust him, but he still likes him, which I think is good considering obviously they got rid of Ashley over Chris. It kind of shows that Matthew might be able to have a tangible relationship with Chris, who is obviously going to be going on tour apologizing for everyone now in this upcoming episode. He's proven to be correct that Chris is the idol. Again, a very important storyline in episode 10 was Matthew not being able to shake this feeling about Christopher having the idol, and even Ashley tells him to his face eventually that Christopher does have the idol, and he identifies Doug as a threat, as he should. Again, Doug is being set up in the edit to be this big player, this big figure on the season with tons of confessionals and screen time, so I guess that's good content for him. That being said, he still has one of the smallest confessional tools up to this point. No marine content, which again, if this was like Australian Survivor, for example, would be kind of a death sentence, but again, considering that we've had winners like Tom and Erica and Christy, I'm not willing to rule anything out at the moment, but again, not great. And again, kind of similar to Hannah, he is being set up as a very likable individual that could be an endgame threat, taken out around the final 4, the final 5. We've seen this multiple times in Survivor at this point. The insert of strategic content this late into the game, again, week 5, is something that could add justifiability to that argument. But again, considering the fact that even though he has got holes in his edit, I feel like he is a person that has got one of the more consistent edits, a very polished, bright edit that now has the introduction of strategic content. I have put him here at number 4. Now, number 3, someone that I know people are going to disagree with, someone that, again, really did not have a good prior 2 episodes, but I still have him pretty high, and that is Christopher. And it's just so funny just seeing the downfall of Christopher, particularly in episode 10. But again, even though people are going to be ranking Christopher low, I'm sure of it, he is someone that I have noticed could have gotten a lot worse of content. And really, when I was reviewing my notes coming into this power rankings, I had 25 Chris mentions, and that just shows how big of a figure he was in the merge. But again, kind of similar to last week, he was positively portrayed in his exchange with Lee, gets the best of him, takes him out the merge, which is good. And something I also found interesting about the edit was that he was set up to be, obviously, this lapdog to Ashley. We have confessionals from individuals saying that Christopher is kind of just following Ashley around. Lee even says that Ashley's the queen and Christopher's still just like a servant, but really, I don't think that the edit doesn't fully support that, where if anything, and I even talked about this in prior weeks, I feel like Christopher is getting the stronger edit over Ashley, someone that's now eliminated. He had more connection setup, he had the better storyline in my opinion, he had his desires better defined, so I feel like the fact that Ashley's taken out as someone that's seen as a bigger threat to Christopher, but it doesn't fully match the edit is kind of in a weird way a positive for Christopher. He finds the idol and plays it in a situation where he knows he would have went home, although he kind of loses Ashley. But as we kind of see in the edit, and there's particular emphasis set on this, it's kind of due to Lee's lie, kind of justifying the fact that yes, him and Ashley were down in the votes, but it wasn't entirely his fault. He gets to outline he's becoming uneasy coming into the vote, but he doesn't have many other options, again showing why he voted for Nathan. And also he does get to talk about how he feels worried, and he does end up playing the idol correctly, so that is good for him, and I feel like it does show that Christopher is a strategic player, and he still has connections set up in the edit with the likes of a Doug, a Leani that had particular focus, even a Peg Leg, so I think that that's good for him. Obviously there are negatives to Christopher. I mean, he gets called out by Peg Leg for being too safe, even his number 1 ally and Ashley throws him under the bus about the idol, Matthew suspects he has the idol, Peg Leg suspects the idol. It's kind of bad that we have this content about Christopher thinking he's got away with hiding the clue, only for everyone to suspect that he has the idol, and he is someone that now has lost his number 1 ally and is obviously going on his apology tour. But I do think that he can be able to recover. Again, he had such strong content for the first 3 weeks. Again, he was number 1 on my rankings, and he is an individual that I feel like this was just inevitable to happen. I don't see how they couldn't have kind of stained his edit with negativity. And even then, when you really look at it, they could have given him a far more negative edit, especially during that merge round, but they didn't. So because of that, because I feel like he kind of is being shielded in the edit, I've got him here at number 3. Not number 2, someone that, again, has never been number 1 in my rankings, and that's Doug. And it's so unfortunate because 75% of this week 5, I was ready to put Doug in my number 1 spot. I was loving his content. He had so much screen time. He was explaining his moves. He was coming off as this narrator, but also talking about kind of from this knowledgeable position what people should be doing. And then in the back 25% of the season, we got this content about how no one trusts him. I mean, we have a barrage of worrying content from Nathan, Matthew, and Chris calling Doug untrustworthy and a threat. We see that he is the person to ultimately convince Chris to vote for Nathan, so that could have backlash. He votes for Lee and isn't part of the majority at the merge, and there's particular emphasis put on that. And he votes for Ashley over Lee, potentially breaking Tanuk and Leilani's trust as well. So that could also be quite worrying, and why people, even though it isn't fully established in the edit, could not trust him. But again, so much positivity for Doug. I mean, lots of Doug content, always getting his thoughts on the game. All 3 of Tanuk, Leilani, and Christopher dropped to give Doug the immunity win. Leilani even says, "I love you," which is super impressive considering Leilani and Doug only had about 2 days to connect. They were pretty much on different tribes except for that small part where Leilani got to visit Leani. So that's super impressive that he was able to do that. He is saying about what Lee needs to do when scrambling, again, being an individual that's obviously showing off his strategic knowledge. And he is executing his pre-game strategy of shields well, where, again, pre-game I wouldn't put any notice into it, but the fact that, again, the content was taken after the season, where they sat the contestants down and asked some questions, but they had to act like it was their intentions coming into the game, is kind of funny, because we're starting to see resolution to Doug saying about how he wants shields. He's got the likes of Tanuk, Nathan, and even a Christopher that are shields for him now at the final 9, and he is someone that, even though there are holes in the edits that ultimately put him outside of number 1 again, unfortunately, I feel like he is someone that undeniably at this point is a front runner ethically and just logically in general. But no, at number 1, someone that was number 1 last week on my list retains that prize in my opinion, and that is Tanuk. And so much positivity for Tanuk. Get to address the underlying sexism in the season, which again I feel like is just really bolstering Tanuk, showing her off in a fantastic light. She gets to outline why she flipped on Ashley despite wanting an all-girls group, so that's good. Successfully executes the plan to get out the adversarial figure in Lee, someone that we know is going after Tanuk. Calls out that after Lee's boot, both Christopher and Ashley are next on the chopping block, which as we see they are. They literally split the vote on Chris and Ashley, and we also do see that Tanuk gets to have her way initially, as she is someone that wants to get rid of Christopher so she can have Ashley as an extra vote. Again, firstly, good that she's getting this content outlining her plans and what it means for her to be able to keep Ashley over Christopher, and we also see why Christopher is set up to be the main vote, and it's really to help Tanuk, if anything. Again, good strategic content, even though Ashley is the boot, but again, it's because Christopher played an idol on himself, so that isn't really a knock for Tanuk. Again, I feel like that's the edit showing, well, this is what she would have done if she happened to have Ashley, but it was just unfortunate that Christopher had the idol. And she's always involved in these majority groups. I mean, if you go back and if you see episode 9 and 10, all the majority alliance discussions with the likes of Doug, Hannah, Matthew, Nathan, Leani. I mean, Tanuk is always there. She just seems to be basically at the middle of the spider web, able to control things, and someone that everyone's going to, which is a fantastic spot. The only problem is that we do have this underlying negativity kind of establishing Tanuk as a threat. She's talked about as being a strong female, and then even Lee is saying her and Leilani are quote-unquote bad vibes, which, mind you, it is Lee, but again, a little bit of a worry. But I would say that the gap between Tanuk and number 2 at this point has firmly increased to the point that I feel like Tanuk is a pretty solid number 1 to have after this week. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with my rankings or not? I know there's some spicy takes in there, but again, that's what the comment section is for. If you do want to check out more of my content, I will eventually be uploading a new video on the Bandit Survivor channel. It's just been, again, a very busy time, and these videos are just so much more easier to make. It takes under an hour to make these videos, whereas a Bandit Survivor video takes maybe up to 10 hours, so if you do want to check out my main channel content, I talked about the Survivor 45 auction. It's a great way to get into Survivor US. Again, you have my commentary, my narration. You get to see me doing editing. So it is something that if you are trying to get into the Survivor sphere, would be a very good video to get started with. But thank you all for watching this video. Have a good day. Peace!